What you're about to watch is taken from Rebel Base, IGN's weekly Star Wars show.
And it's 7 reasons why Star Wars Rebels is way better than the Star Wars prequels. So we're going to kick things off. Reason 1, design.
Design.
Yeah,
Let's
now,
go for it.
a lot of the characters and stuff in Star Wars Rebels is based on the original Ralph McQuarrie drawings. Like, they've gone back to the vaults, they've gone to like the Return of the Jedi sketchbook. Dave Filoni and Simon Kinberg have been taking bits out and just, they pretty much got free reign to do whatever they want.
They've gone back to the drawing board of Ralph.
Literally.
So this ties into what I think they're doing overall with the Star Wars franchise right now. I went to Star Wars Celebration Europe last year, and Dave Filoni was there, and Kathleen Kennedy was there talking about the films they were making. And Ralph McQuarrie came up in both lectures, both talks. And I think it's just, there's something about the style of his original drawings. He also did production design on other films like E.T. and Cocoon. But there's something about, he established the kind of visual grammar of Star Wars. And if you look at the Force Awakens trailers, there's even stuff in there that owes a debt to McQuarrie. And Dave Filoni talked about on Rebels how they created a set of digital brushes that would recreate his style of work. So it really just, he is synonymous with Star Wars and the look of it. If you look at the design for Zeb as well, this is the more interesting thing for me. It is pretty much exactly how Chewbacca was originally drawn by him. And it really works in the show as well, because you've got this sort of hulking creature, but he's got a little bit, tiny bit more personality for him, but it just adds another level of depth to it. Okay, Gav, but why is that better than the prequels? It's better because it feels like Star Wars. I have a big problem in general with prequel stuff because they have to like reverse engineer technology. And they have to like backdate it, almost trace it back. Which is strange because it's not as creative. Because you have to like almost copy something or work it back to a more kind of basic form. And just a lot of it, they didn't really do that as much, and a lot of it was kind of derivative rather than being exciting and new.
Next up, no condescending plots. Now this is a really, really big one because a lot of the time when you're watching the episodes, it almost feels like you've missed something because it doesn't waste time with building up anything at all. It literally just chucks you in the deep end, sometimes right in the middle of missions, and like, it can be a tad confusing sometimes. There's one particular, in episode 4, Breaking Ranks, you see Ezra, who's like the main character. He has infiltrated the Stormtroopers sort of academy, which is a huge, huge part of the entire series. But they don't talk about this barely on the show before it. There's not like a big thing where they like planning the mission and they're going, right, this is how we're going to do it. It's literally, the episode starts, he's already there, you've missed all the sort of preamble, and then it's just, you're sort of dumped right in the middle for like the real juicy bits.
So that's kind of similar to what they do in ancient Greek poetry from the Iliad and Homer onwards. Am I condescending at all? No,
And why is this better than the prequels? Because one of the worst things about the prequels, I think, is how much time they spend just wasting time with all this exposition, like all the Senate stuff and things like that, which is interesting, and it does build up for things later on. But you just don't need it.
It's just a more artful, elegant way to tell a story, is to show and don't tell. I think the prequels get too bogged down telling you the story of Anakin Skywalker's fall into Vader, rather than just showing it to you.
What's next, Daniel?
Space.
That's right.
Because after all, it is called Star Wars. And Rebels is really great because it still gives you those kind of epic dogfights. There's large parts of episodes which are set entirely in space.
That's right,
And that kind of reminds me strongly of the original. Pretty much like most of my favourite scenes in the original, you know, it's like the trench run and stuff like that. Or being in the cockpit of Millennium Falcon.
For me, when I think of Star Wars, I think of them arguing and bickering in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. That happens all the time in Star Wars Rebels. So much of it takes place aboard their vessel, the Ghost.
Which is strongly reminiscent of...
It's pretty much Millennium Falcon, And why is that better than the prequels?
Because it's basically planet wars.
I mean, like, even though, you know, you've got the Clone Wars and stuff like that, so much of those battles and so much of the actual war take place on the ground with, like, troops.
Underwater.
Whereas a lot of this takes place back in space, which is awesome. That's what we want to see.
Spiritual home of Star Wars.
Next up, cartoony action. Now, don't know if you've missed it, but it's actually a cartoon. I know, right? So there's a lot of action that takes place that it would just look silly if it was in films. And I don't know if you've watched the prequels lately. I have, and it hasn't aged well. Like, a lot of the fight scenes and a lot of the action scenes, because they've used all this like odd CGI, it it just looks like a really rubbish cartoon, whereas this is a really good cartoon, and the action sequences sort of take advantage of that a little bit, and there's so many sequences that just couldn't work in the sort of same way. Reason 5 for me is the Empire and actually having a decent bad guy. Now, there is the Inquisitor, played by Jason Isaacs.
That's who you get if you want a bad guy.
And like we've talked about him so much on this show, so go back and watch other episodes if you haven't. But he's just so good and he's evil, and you can really feel Darth Vader's presence over all of it. Like, the Inquisitor works with Darth Vader. He's been tasked with going around finding Jedis and Force-sensitive kids to murder them. But why is this better than the prequels?
I think the prequels kind of go for this great epic Greek tragedy, Shakespearean tragedy about the fall of this kid who's supposed to be the chosen one.
That's right.
It kind of struggles with the villain. It throws several up, doesn't really latch onto one. Darth Maul, everyone loved the look, has some iconic moments, dies, spoilers. Dooku the same, Grievous the same, the Chancellor's there in the background, the Emperor. It just lacks a really strong villain, and it obviously, Anakin eventually becomes one of the greatest villains of all time.
Of course, yeah.
But
he's not.
I think he wants to be really ambiguous and play with the idea of who's really evil. And it's like, no, in this kind of like high adventure space opera, you need an evil figure.
My next one, reason 6, is new characters. Now, you sort of just touched upon it a little bit now, why I think Rebels is better than prequels for this reason, is a lot of the characters in the prequels are based on characters we already know, or they're young versions of characters that we know what happens to them, sort of thing. Whereas this, because it's a new cast, they sort of have a little tiny bit more free reign with them, and because it's a TV show as well, there's so much we don't actually know about them, and it sort of feels like it's going in a really, really good place. It's almost like the way that they put them together is almost reminiscent of like Firefly, like sort of like a ragtag bunch of sort of like space pirates tooling around doing cool stuff for the Rebels.
And this puts them in from the get-go a much stronger position than the prequels, where you're kind of retracing steps that you can kind of already infer for yourself. This gives them much more creative freedom, doesn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Final reason then is General Excitement. Now, it's not a new character called General Excitement. It's just the fact that it left me at the end of the series so excited for Star Wars. And like a lot of that, I think, is the fact that, there's really cool little Easter eggs like peppered throughout. Like there's a little bit where you see the droid RX-24 from the Star Tours, and he's voiced by the same guy. He looks exactly the same, but he's sort of updated. There's a couple of other bits where you see sort of old Luke from the comics there. Like he's not playing Luke Skywalker, because that sort of doesn't fit in with that timeline, but he's there and you can see it, and you can see that the people making it are genuinely having a lot of fun, whereas I don't think anybody had fun making the prequels. Maybe they did, I don't know.
Guys who do green screen.
Yeah, maybe. The people who are actually making the cloth.
People who sell green screen. They're having a great time. What, he wants more of it? Got reams, mate.
Exactly, but I think because it just left me with a sense of excitement that I haven't had for Star Wars, with a new Star Wars thing, for years, I think. And, as the new series being confirmed with a lot more episodes, so it really feels like they're going to flesh out these characters who we've grown to love over a very, very short period of time.
So those are 7 reasons we think Star Wars Rebels is better than the prequels, or maybe 7 reasons you should watch it to get excited for The Force Awakens. As always, we want to hear from you, so email us at rebelbase@ign.com.
And for everything Star Wars, stay right here on IGN.